Welcome to my plate of Automate Everything series, episode number 4, Pizza Automation Mark II. So because the Pizza Automate system by itself is very straightforward and not really that interesting, I thought I would make the video more about the entire pizza restaurant, where I also gonna explain all the other automate and semi-automate systems for all the starter and dessert that you can see in this place, which is almost all of the starter and dessert that you can get in the game. Like, the only starter that I couldn't fit in this place anymore because I ran out of space is the Mandarin. But other than that, every other starter and dessert that you can get is in this place. Okay, without further ado, let's jump to the time-lapse part of the video. And if you are interested, I will be back later on for the explanation part. Okay, now we'll go to the explanation part of the video where I explain how the automation system that you saw in the final restaurant works. And because the pizza automation system is very simple and very straightforward, so just jump straight to the practice mode. And this is basically how the 3 types of pizza are made. And for those of you who paid close attention, you probably already see the difference to the one that you saw in the final restaurant. And this is the difference I was talking about. It's about the dough making system. This dough making system is created to just make pizza and pizza only. So if you want to just make pizza and nothing else, you should use this one. That way you can save yourself tiles, because this one only use one combiner. But if you want to make bread and pie as well, then you have to grab out the dough ball before it turns into the pizza pie, right? And in the first dough ball split, you want it to look exactly like this, because if something is like created or transformed in an instant, then the rotation grabber will have the prio over the smart grabber. And this is how you create the prio, and that way the dough ball will go to the bread making system first before it goes to the other system. Because at the beginning of the day, you want the bread to be made first before the pizza and the pie, because it's the starter, right? And the second prio will go to the pie though, even though ideally I would want it to be the pizza, right? But because it didn't fit in my restaurant, I have to use it this way. And another thing that's worth to be mentioned is if you want to use a combiner in the sink to turn your flour into dough ball, and you don't want to use a smart grabber behind it, instead you want to use a rotation grabber to create prio or whatever reason, right, to save some space, then you should be careful, because if as soon as you add in another system that do the same thing, for example the soup system, you want to fill up your pot with water and you want to use the combiner and the sink as well, then the two systems will counter each other out, and one of the system will fail you. Like you see how the pot is not filled with water, but that's random. Sometimes the flour won't turn into dough ball, sometimes the pot won't fill up with water. I mean, nonetheless, you don't want neither of them to be failing, right? And one of the ways to solve this issue is by creating an offbeat. You see how I put in a conveyor in between the grabber and the sink. That way I can create an offbeat, and the flour is moving in different speed than the pot at the beginning of the day, and that way both systems will work normally, and then I will get the dough ball and the pot that's filled with water. Now theoretically, if you play in the multiplayer game and one of the player is making the dough ball system moving and the other one is making the water pot system moving at the same time, then the system can also fail you still. But like in a single mode, that is luckily not possible, because like you yourself cannot move both at the same time. And the other way and better way to solve this issue is by using a portioner and the sink instead of the combiner and the sink. And shout out to Ezekiel, one of my viewers, who told me about this possibility of using the portioner and the sink instead of the combiner and the sink to make the dough ball and the water pot and whatever, right? But because I'm not familiar with this solution, I can't say for sure if this is like bulletproof and will never fail you in a multiplayer game. But like in the single player modus, it should work 100% of the time, for the same reason with the one solution that I came up with, right? And now we'll go to some of the other system that is in the restaurant and explain them a little bit. And I will start with the Pi semi-automation system, which is my Pi Mark 3A right here and my Pi Mark 3B right here. The Mark 3B is the one that you saw in the restaurant. And because I realized that I never really explained the rotation system in my previous video, I thought I would explain it a little bit as well. And so let me start with the rotation system. And so what I use in the rotation system is the grab in prio over the push in prio, right? And because the grab in prio has higher priority than the push in prio, at least in a normal scenario where you don't do some double grab shenanigan, then the grab in mechanic will have the prio over the push in mechanic. And that is why at maximum there will only be 3 things that is rotating in the system, and the 4th things will not enter the system and block everything. And here you have to use a normal grabber or a smart grabber, because those two has the push out prio over the side grabbing from the rotation grabber, right? And that is why the prep station or frozen prep station will be filled up with the cooked ingredients. And the only thing that you have to remember is that you cannot push the ingredient straight into the hob or into the tile that is behind the hob. Now the reason why you can't push it straight into the hob is that then there's no grabbing prio in the system, right? And because the push in and push in doesn't have a prio over each other, and then it will be RNG which one goes in first, and then the system can be blocked with 4 ingredients. And the reason why you cannot push it behind the hob is because once the ingredient that you want to cook is cooking, then it will pause the rotation, and then the ingredients do have time to enter the system, and then it will block the entire system with 4 ingredients, right? And that is why you have to push the ingredient in front of the system. It doesn't matter if you push it in this rotation grabber or push it in this rotation grabber. Both of them will not block the rotation system. And now we'll also talk a little bit about the double grab shenanigan that I briefly mentioned early on. And this is basically what I mean with double grabbing, right? Like in this double grabbing system, the entire grabbing priorities becomes like a completely mess. Like even the conveyor push out mechanic may even get the first prio over the grabbing mechanic from both of the double grabbing grabber, right? And that is why you cannot rotate the pie the other way around in the rotation system, because in the worst case scenario, this smart grabber right here will never grab, so this will never fill up, and then the rotation system will continue rotating inside there, and this one will be empty, right? And that is obviously not something that you want to happen. And that should also kind of explain the way the 2-pie system work, right? They have to rotate this way, they cannot rotate the other way around because of the double grab situation, and the pie cannot be pushed into the grabber that comes right after the hob, because that would stop the rotation. And so in the Pi Mark 3A system right here, I have to push the pie into this grabber, and that makes it impossible for me to fit it in to the restaurant that you saw in the time lapse. Because otherwise you should always use the Pi Mark 3A because it's the better system than the Pi Mark 3B. And the reason why the Pi Mark 3B is worse than the Pi Mark 3A is because it has the bigger rotation system in it. And that will make it possible for the maximum amount of 5 pies rotating in this system, while in this system there can only be 3 rotating inside it. And the more pies are rotating in the system, then the slower the rotation will be and the slower the reproduction of the pies will be. And the other issue that the slow rotation in the system creates is that you cannot overproduce cherry pies. Because if you overproduce cherry pies and the cherry pie cannot be grabbed out by the smart grabber and it has to rotate inside the system, then the danger hob will burn it and then it will catch fire. And if you're unlucky like me and got the high standard card where your food burns for 100% faster, then you even have to use the hob instead of the danger hob, and that will make the cooking process even slower, and then this system will be even slower. And I think that's pretty much everything I need to say about the pie system. And other than that, let's just move to the soup system. So for the soup system, I will go back to the final restaurant and explain the soup system here. So this is my soup Mark II, and like the pie system, this system is also only semi-automated. So you still have to put in the ingredient and combine it with the broth manually. But other than that, I think the soup system is not really that complicated and very straightforward. I just want to talk about some issue that you might run into if you decide to use this system. So the first one will be the water refill issue that I mentioned early on. So if you don't have a portioner and you have to use a combiner in the sink instead, then you have to make sure that it doesn't create any issue with your dough ball system on the other side. So like I said earlier on, you have to make sure that you do not use combiner and sink in both systems, or you have to create an offbeat to avoid the issue. And the next one is, if you're wondering if you could do this and save yourself a tile by doing this, the answer is unfortunately no, because if the soup is teleporting from the right side to the left side, then the rotation grabber will have prio over the tomato soup grabber over here, and therefore the tomato soup will never be refilled. And so you have to do it this way. I mean, I use the same principle down here for the pumpkin seed, right? That way I can create the prio and make sure that the pumpkin seed will always go to the cooking system first before it go into the trash can. And the third and last thing that I want to talk about in the system is, because the soup that is coming from the portioner is being pushed into the teleporter rotation system, therefore it does not have the prio over the grabber that is in the teleporter rotation system, and that's mean that there can only be 3 soup rotating in the teleporter rotation system, and so you have to make sure that you do not overproduce too many soup, or you just have to throw away some of the soup to clean up the rotation, and therefore the soup can go back in and rotate. But on that, everything else is very straightforward and simple, so I don't think they need an explanation. Like the cheese board system and the pumpkin seed and bread system are very straightforward, just cooking with the safety hob and combining and stuff. And now we'll just go to the practice mode one last time and talk a little bit about the strategy at the beginning of the day and during the day. And so at the beginning of the day, you want to refill your pie system. You want to refill the smart rubber with pie, and then you want to look at the table. If it's a 2-man table, then you have to wait a little bit for the bread to be made. If you take the order too early, and because the pumpkin seed is auto made and auto served immediately, then the customer may complain, and then you might lose because the bread takes too long to make, right? And if it's a single table, then you only have to wait a couple seconds for the bread to catch up a little bit, and then you can take the order. And especially with the affordable card that I have to be extra careful. I don't want to take the order too early at the beginning of the day. And the other thing that I want to talk about is the soup refill time. If you only have 3 soup of the soup left, then you can refill the soup, because then 1 soup will be rotated in the system, right? But like I said before, make sure you don't have too many soup that is rotating in the teleporter rotation system. And the way you make tomato soup is by doing this. You just put it one in the mixer and one in the combiner, and then it will automate. And every other soup is just very straightforward, right? Single ingredient soup, just make it. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the misdrop situation. The only 2 places where you cannot misdrop things is the pie system. You cannot put it in there, otherwise it will block the entire pie system. Then you won't be able to make pie for the rest of the day anymore. And the other one will be the number 2 teleporter. You cannot drop things there, otherwise the teleporter number 2 will be blocked. It's okay for you to drop things into the teleporter number 1, because that way it just come back into the teleporter number 2. But if you drop it this way around, then it will be blocked, and then you will no longer be able to use this teleporter, and then you will most likely lose. And I think that is pretty much everything I want to talk about for this restaurant. I hope you liked the idea. If you have some questions, feel free to ask. If you have something to criticize, feel free to criticize. Other than that, I hope you liked the video, and thanks for watching.